So today we're going to talk about Agnes Ku's reading about Central Police Station compound. The article focus is that she analyzed and reveals the preservation in Hong Kong appears to be a moderate success for anti-commercialism. And in fact, it is also a huge success of the government narrative in constructing people's collective memories. It also explores how different stakeholders take part in defining and enhancing cultural values of heritage through cultural discourses and practices. And finally, why and how this construction of collective memory works. So the conflict of CPS is very clear. Since it has commercial potential that sounds appealing to government and developers, but on the other hand, the civil society actors here means people like local residents and press. They are more concerned with the humanistic value of heritage and society. But the problem is CPS doesn't have well-documented history, and it also failed to associate with the everyday life of the public. Therefore, the writer said that the preservation of CPS can mark as a successful case of social construction of meanings for a place that lack personal experience in discourses. The urge of public to preserve CPS showed that they agree and accept the benign reading of colonialism as a part of stable and coherent Hong Kong story. And since it is marked as the early foundation of legal development in Hong Kong, the meaning was created through symbolization via an abstract idea of rule of law, and it turned into a symbol of identification of Hong Kong and somehow became our collective memories. And it also echoes with the notion that heritage was a meaning-making process. And here I want to talk about the trade of space production by Lefebvre. The space is a dynamic entity produced through the interaction of spatial practices, conceived space, and lived space. They are inherently social and cannot separate it from social production. Spatial practice describe the cohesive patterns and places of social activities, and conceived place takes a physical form and was considered the dominant space within a society. And finally, lived space is considered as a passively experienced space. In the case of Hong Kong, people continuously extend the conceived space to promote capital accumulation and resulting in the homogenizing and fragmenting local lived space. And since the 80s, Hong Kong was positioned by the government as a top-notch global financial center. Therefore, a set of spatial practices, such as reclamation, took place in Hong Kong, and preservation became an undesirable option for the market. And here also echoes with the disappearance by others, since Hong Kongers, the people in Hong Kong at that time, seen themselves as merely migrants, resulting in little public attention for preservation, which is the refusal to acknowledge Hong Kong has been able to develop its own culture. So here is the timeline I organized and called it the Battle of Anti-Commercialism. And it shows how civil society actors try to engage in the heritage-making process. So lastly, I would sum up with AHD. Although the heritage-making process of a central police station seems to involve some kind of public engagement, you can see from the timeline. But however, decisions are mainly implemented by government officials. And through the preservation of CPS, the government would like to reinforce the sense of citizenship, want us to be proud of the well-developed legal system as well as the rule of law in Hong Kong, so as to legitimize this SAR government as it continues with the rule of law.
So I will continue the timeline that proposed by Luna. So in between 2004 and 2007, there's a gap period of 3 years which government did not propose any development plan on CPS compound. So this vacant period which gave civic society an opportunity to create a meaning of heritage through two discourse. The first one is architectural value, and the second is social historical value. So they've proven the architectural value of the CPS compound by emphasizing its architectural aesthetic and as well as rarity. So the CPS compound did demonstrate the architectural feature of the Edwardian and Victorian period, such as the neoclassicism with Greek revival style. So consider the economic-driven nature of Hong Kong. So this kind of old historical building is actually very rare because many of these kind of old buildings have been demolished for the sake of economic development. So the second is the social historical value. So as there are only limited historical information provided about the CPS compound, so the civil society had made attempt to construct their own discourse to relate the historical origin, symbolic meaning, as well as the graphical meaning of CPS compound to the Hong Kong identity. So they're trying to invent their own historical significance to the architecture. So such discourse was placed under a qualitative framework for remembering of the colonial history. So what is qualitative framework? Qualitative frameworks refers to the instrument used by qualitative memory to construct an image of the past, which is in accord with the predominant thoughts of the society. So for example, so the concept of rule of law is exactly the qualitative framework which have been used in the CPS compound preservation project. So there's a general principle for this qualitative framework, is that the colonial history should be viewed as something neutral, without involving any ideological or political consideration. So, for example, the public no longer have to demerit the colonial history because of the Chinese nationalism. So they have the opportunity to interpret or read this kind of colonial history very fair without any bias. So it allow a better appreciation of heritage and culture of that era. But how was this kind of qualitative framework be organized? So the framework was organized through several overlapping dichotomies, including Western versus Chinese, modern versus tradition, and urban versus rural. So the function of having these kind of dichotomies and distinction is to give specific spatial, historical, and symbolic meaning to the architecture. So these three kinds of meaning would eventually shape the architecture into a conceptualized space. So the meaning of conceptualized space was equals to the term conceived space, which have already been covered by my partner in the first part of the presentation. So this conceived space will stand at the core of the definition of the Hong Kong identity. So making the architecture relatable to the Hong Kong citizens. So after that, the discourse is complete. The social historical value of heritage was proven if there's a connection built between the public and the architecture. However, there's also defects for this kind of structure because the understanding of colonial culture or heritage may be confined by these set dichotomies, circumscribe our critical thinking or how to our views is some kind of limited by these kind of dichotomies or binaries. So after talking about how the qualitative framework is formed, so I will talk about the content of this course and the qualitative framework of rule of law. So in the public discourse, the CPS compound was being regarded as the icon of rule of law tradition in Hong Kong. So rule of law, which used as the qualitative framework to give historical and heritage significance to the CPS compound. However, such discourse was echo to the official narrative of Hong Kong history, even though the civic society they're making the effort to create their own discourse. Well, what's the content of the official narrative? Actually, it's about Hong Kong story, which is relatable to the economic narrative progress. So Hong Kong's story or history of Hong Kong is interpreted as a linear interpretation to the past in the official narrative. So history was associated with progress and development. It always lets to line everything will go forward. So for example, the Hong Kong example, Hong Kong has transformed from a fishing village to IFC, transformed from a distant past to a modern civilization, just like progress. So Central was very significant to this kind of narrative because Central is served as the originating place of the development. So it is the political, economic, and cultural hub. So this place has witnessed how Hong Kong has been progressed. So in this kind of narrative of progress, so legal system is have a very significant place. So legal system, the official narrative regards as the finding stone of the governing and economic success of Hong Kong. So they have drawn an equal between colonial administration to the rule of law. So rule of law brought the success of common administration and also brought progress and prosperity to Hong Kong. So I'll talk about the role of CPS compound in the Hong Kong narrative. Since the compound was located in Central, which was the base of the colonial governance, and its function as a law enforcing institution, as the combination of prison and police station, the public discourse has then signified the CPS compound as the origin of the successful colonial governance, as well as the originate place of the rule of law. Because the success of Hong Kong is built on the rule of law. So if CPS compound is the place who born the rule of law, so it's also treated as the source of the urban civilization. So Hong Kong, everything is based on the CPS compound. So once the civic society have made a consensus on the above discourse, actually they have already subsumed or absorbed by the official narrative, also agreeing that rule of law is as the core value of Hong Kong. But why rule of law as the qualitative framework was been so convincing? So why the official narrative has always been prevailing? So this is associated with the rule of law tradition, which distinguished Hong Kong from People's Republic of China in the arrangement of one country, two system. So in the Article 8 of Basic Law, so it ensures Hong Kong people that after the handover of the sovereignty, so the existing legal system will remain unchanged. So the legal terms set in the colonial period will be preserved and will be continued to the after the 1997. So there's a issue. So there's a continuity on the legal system, which will ensure the stability. Although there's no democracy, but at least there's a still rule of law which can kind of safeguard your human rights and civil liberty. So it's trying to create a sense or illusion of community despite the change of sovereignty. But there's also the problem behind this kind of rule of law as the qualitative framework, because there's a different interpretation of rule of law between the government and the civic society. So before I talk about the difference between the two, I want to talk about what's the spirit behind the rule of law. So I make a quote from a Lord Bingham, which is a judge from UK. So he said, a legal system that does not protect the fundamental rights and liberties cannot possibly qualify as one that upholds the rule of law, which means the reality of rule of law is also emphasize the importance of human rights or how the rule of law safeguard your civil liberty, but not just about how law ensure order or how just emphasizing to the citizens to obey the law set by the government. So do the colonial government really align to this real principle of rule of law? The answer is not. Actually, the colonial government has rather put emphasis on aspect of law and order. Such, for example, the Public Order Bill in 1967, set after the riots, 公安條例. So through this bill, the legitimacy of Hong Kong police was established. They have set many harsh ordinance or kind of serious criminal offense which have hindered citizens' right on peaceful assembly, which bring this is only partial rule of law. While law and order was maintained, the human rights and civil liberties was not fully exercised under the practice of rule of law. So it's just partial. So the situation of human rights only improved when Christopher Payton have reviewed the Public Order Bill in the early 90s. However, such bill was being revised again after 1997, and the civil liberties have been being narrowed. So, and in news report, we always hear that the Hong Kong officials saying that the importance of rule of law as something core value of Hong Kong, and stressing the process to follow the rule of law and to obey the law. Actually, what they have emphasized is rule by law more than rule of law. So they are always mention rule Hong Kong according with law, but without putting enough emphasis on the aspect of human rights protections. There's a misrecognition of rule of law as a symbol of the colonial history and Hong Kong culture, since through the process of colonial history, rule of law not really fully applicate. So it's great kind of illusion and a misrepresentation of colonial or Hong Kong culture.
Now, I would like to talk about the challenge of constructing a coherent narrative for Hong Kong with the people-related memories. The people-related memories of the compound were usually fragmentary. Unlike the state-related memory, it was not able to strike much public echo through a collective framework of the time. It was also hard to provoke fun emotions from people and develop a coherent narrative for Hong Kong. So, whose memories could be the representatives of the compound? Some people tend to associate the place with some significant figure, such as the Sun Yat-sen. There are some studies discovered that Sun Yat-sen was once sent to Victoria prison. However, those memories within the national framework failed to connect with the modern society or narrative of Hong Kong. The author suggested that the prisoners should be the representatives of the people in prison. However, they usually were considered as anomalous, as they were being isolated from the public. It was true that they were the insiders of their memories and heritage, but also the outsiders to society. Generally speaking, collective memory is evoked to imply a relationship of the place with the people in a generation or across generations. Whether it's collective or personal, they share some common experience related to a specific historical era. From the previous example, we could reveal that the public accessibility is the fundamental part for a claim to collective memory. Victoria Prison is a forbidden place with limited public access. The relationship between the general public was weak. The public did not share the same memories, not to mention provoke any sensation of the site. Here's a very interesting example shared by the author based on the claim of public accessibility. The picture was taken in 2004. Some preservation activists contend that the Block F entrance of Victoria Prison should be preserved. They suggested their claim was grounded on the collective memory of Hong Kong citizens, because the Block F's entrance was the only direct access could be reached by the public. It was pleased to see the general public was so engaged in the action, in the sense that the entrance was just a door to the interior of the prison. His its historical and cultural value was relatively low, it was clear that their efficacy was based on the collective memories rather than historical value. However, collective memory here instead become a cliché, in the sense that public accessibility is the fundamental part for claim to collective memory. The general public would not visit the prison randomly, no matter it was a direct access. The shared memory were still limited. People misrecognize the term collective memory. It become a rhetorical point or cognitive claim in order to add social value and idealize the past of the site. In fact, the memories of the ancients were only related to a certain group of people. Therefore, the author said the claim to collective memory would appear relatively weak. Echo to the spatial experience just mentioned by Bobby, in this session we will take a look at how several groups use the site to create spatial memory. As we mentioned that the accessibility of the compound was low, people and government tend to narrate the commonplace instead of the compound, thus noteworthy narratives or challenge the hegemonic narrative with the story of compound. The emptiness of the discursive space was now turned to an advantage. The possibilities of the site would not be limited by the previous narratives. The story related to the site could be utilized in the future attached to collective history. The sense of strangeness and mystery about the compound stimulate much curiosity with prison life. Since 2004, the compound was open to public after the discussion by the civil groups were, and we can observe that the use of sites was not only manipulated by the government. In 2004, a series of interactive activities concerning the historical significance and preservation was conducted by the civil groups. The activities not only foster a deeper, more concrete, and more intimate sense of history by producing an experiential relationship with the compound, but also encourage people to participate in cause of preservation. It could be a strategy against commercialization by enforcing intimacy with the site and arousing the awareness of the sense of conservation. After the success done by the civil groups, the open days were taken over by the Tourist Bureau in 2005. The site was pushed further from a district heritage to a heritage belongs to the entire society. It suggested that the Tourist Bureau attempted to recapture the power of narrating the site. In the discourse on human rights was the theme of Open Day in 2006, the approach seems to be echoing the rule of law. That's the collective or hegemonic framework in that time, which was a social value passed down from the colonial period. It sought to inculcate the pre-existing values and narrative of Hong Kong, namely the rule of law by repetition, which automatically implies continuity with the past. However, under the benign status approach, certain history and critiques on the colonial rule were ignored, especially some the dark history. CPS compounds was transformed into interactive public space for cultural activities from a forbidden space. In 2008, imprisonment became a theme of artwork in the exhibition. Therefore, the author suggested that the site was more present than past-looking. It is believed that making heritage interactive could make it remain alive and comprehensible. Through some of the case reveals how the heritage and cultural value of the compound was defended and constructed through a host of discourse. In fact, not all collective memory would be subsumed in the official Hong Kong story. Rule of law is the core hegemonic framework in narrating Hong Kong's development shared since the colonial period. The collective framework also reinforced the role of the site as an icon of collective identification for the site as a whole. Finally, previous cultural activities not only provide the chance for the public to know more about the historical significance of the site, but also expand the possibilities in terms of application. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you.